So I have been keeping a secret. I am in fact the illustrator behind Zoe Sugg's Vlogmas intros. And for the first time ever, I'm going to be taking you behind the scenes to show you how we did it. Before we get started, I thought it might be best to introduce myself to anyone who is new here. Hi, hello, and welcome. My name is Jess and I am an illustrator. I specialise in children's books, but I do, on the odd occasion, do other things as well, like Vlogmas intros for Zoe Sugg. If you don't know Zoe or have never heard of Vlogmas, I'll give you a very quick overview. Zoe Sugg, aka Zoella, is actually the person who got me into YouTube in the first place. She is a YouTuber and I've been watching her videos for years and years, and every year I especially look forward to her Vlogmas videos. Zoe is actually so much more than a YouTuber. She is an author, an entrepreneur, a mental health advocate, a mother, the list goes on. So yeah, getting to illustrate her Vlogmas intro for, I believe, what is the 4th time this year. I feel very, very lucky and so grateful. And then for those, sorry, my cat is attacking my foot. So for anyone who is wondering what on earth is Vlogmas, Vlogmas is a YouTube tradition where creators post videos, usually daily videos, throughout the month of December in the lead up to Christmas. A lot of these creators will also include a fun animated intro. So you may be wondering, how on earth did I get this job in the first place? If I take you back to 2020, I had watched one of Zoe's YouTube videos, one in which she visited a pumpkin patch, and was inspired to create this illustration. Zoe saw the illustration, she liked it, which was exciting enough in itself. And then a couple of weeks later, I received a message from an animator named Rosie Miles asking if I would be interested in helping to create that year's Vlogmas intro. Yeah, it was just crazy. Something that I just made purely for fun led to this. Fast forward to October 2025, I was contacted by Rosie again. Once again, was asked to create this year's Vlogmas intro. Without further ado, let me take you on a wonderfully festive and creative journey showing you how we went from this to this. Okay, it is officially day 1, although actually technically it's day 2, but never mind. So today I'm going to be developing and refining the rough storyboard that I've already kind of created based off of Zoe and Alfie's idea. We already have this like extremely blobby, messy, rough storyboard, which I'll show you here, which just very loosely maps out the composition and sequence of events, just so that they make sense to all of us. So the opening scene will take place in Zoe and Alfie's conservatory. You'll have a view of the garden through the window and it will be sunset. Snow will just be starting to fall. We move through the conservatory. Zoe's wrapping presents, Alfie's putting a log on the fire, and Ottie and Novi are decorating the Christmas tree. We then move through the conservatory doors. There will be a very short time lapse where we move from sunset to nighttime. Then the garden is transformed into this like gloriously snowy scene. We zoom in even further, and then we see Alfie pulling the girls and Zoe on a sledge through the garden with Nala, their dog, trotting behind them. And then we zoom in even further, and in their wake on the ground, the words Vlogmas and the day number, so day 1, day 2, and so on and so forth, is etched into the snow. And that's pretty much it. And all of that has to happen within 12 seconds or so. So yeah, with that being said, let's make a start. So at this stage, this project is very similar to my usual way of working, in that I always start with a super rough sketch and storyboard. This allows me to very quickly gain a bird's eye perspective of the story, or in this case, intro, without spending too long on details that I might want to change later on. Once everyone is happy with the rough storyboard, that's when I then work on tidying things up, drawing to scale, and adding in all the detail, which is exactly what I'm doing here. So this scene is of course based on a real room, so I am constantly referring back to reference photos and videos to make sure it is as accurate as possible. One thing to note is that we didn't have the outfit details for everyone at this stage, so currently their outfits are just placeholder. So I continued with this process for each key scene of the intro until we had a set of high-res, detailed and legible roughs that enabled us to move forwards on to the next phase of the project. The process of working on this project was not entirely linear, but for the sake of this video we are going to imagine that it were, because the reality was there was lots of back and forth between different elements of the intro. So some days I'd be working on one particular character, and then on another day I'd be working on a different background whilst we were awaiting feedback on that character. I've just tried to order it in a way that makes sense. So for the sake of clarity, let's now move on to what I will call the characters, even though they're real people, but they are caricatures of those real people, I guess. Starting with Zoe. As my work is so stylized, creating a person's likeness can be quite tricky. You want it to look like them, but you also want it to look like your work. I think the key is to identify defining characteristics of that person and to not exaggerate them as in a caricature, but to highlight them instead. Combining all these little things that together make that person recognizable without sacrificing your style. Obviously, things like hair and clothing really help too. On that note, you may notice that Zoe's outfit changes, and that is because we realise later that when placed in the interior scene there were some contrast issues. So Zoe picked a jumper that was a little brighter and helped her to stand out more, although I did love that original cardigan. As I'm working on the characters, I have to constantly remind myself that these are going to be animated, and therefore if I'm drawing hair, for example, particularly long hair that will move somewhat, I need to ensure that the hair is divided into sections so that if, for instance, Zoe's front pieces of hair move with her head, there needs to be hair underneath that so that there isn't a gaping hole when it moves. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well. Whereas normally I would just draw the hair in one layer, so it's not something that I'm used to thinking about and have to keep reminding myself. I also need to ensure that each element is on its own layer and that those layers are organized and named. For instance, the upper arm needs to be on a separate layer to the forearm, almost like a puppet, so that later on Rosie can work her wizardry and move the limbs as required. Often there is a lot of back and forth between Rosie and I. I am forever grateful to her patience with me on this because I don't always get it right. Next we move on to Otti and Novi. They are always my favourite to draw because Zoe picks out such adorable outfits for them. For anyone who might be wondering, I create all my illustrations on my iPad in Procreate, and I primarily use two brushes. One is called Gloaming, and it is a Kyle Webster brush, and the other is called Shale, which you can find in the Procreate library. And finally we have Elfie. Elfie was relatively straightforward to draw, but as you will see in a second, I made some very subtle tweaks to his face at the end, which I think really helped with making him recognisable. This is the thing with stylised characters. Even one tiny line can completely transform a person's face, so you have to be really careful where you are making your marks. So the first background scene I worked on was the nighttime garden scene. So Zoe and Alfie have this amazingly big garden with a huge lawn, these beautiful trees. I wanted to create something that was beautifully snowy, magical and atmospheric. Nighttime scenes are one of my favourite things to illustrate. I really enjoy working in a limited colour palette and thought that a rich sort of teal blue would work beautifully for this. This scene went through many iterations, and making sure that the angles were all working for Rosie was a big part of that. One thing that I didn't realise was how much more of the hills in the background would be visible once the quote-unquote camera moved through the scene, so I had to go back later and fill those in, else there would have been like floating hills, which wouldn't have looked great. Another particularly tricky element was creating the sunset or dusk scene, which had to match up perfectly with the nighttime scene to enable a smooth transition and a convincing passage of time. Honestly, I have to give full credit to Rosie for being the brains behind this. I essentially just had to create individual layers of increasing amounts of snow on the trees, the ground and the fence and so on and so forth, so that as the sun set and the moon rose, the snow continued to fall and the snow would get deeper. And then now we move on to the interior scene, which is where the intro begins. Firstly, I had characters in situ as placeholders so that their outfits and colours could help inform the rest of the scene. This is also where we realised that Zoe's cardigan might need to change. I really enjoyed working on this. Christmas trees are so fun to draw, and I was sure to include lots of the unusual ornaments that Zoe has on her conservatory tree. The brief from the team was to make it fun and colourful and as if it had been decorated with the children, which I think we did pretty well. I said at the beginning of the video that I was going to show you how we made this, because it really was a collaborative project, and what you are seeing now is just a very, very small part of what Rosie was doing on the animation side of things. Whenever Rosie would screen share with me to try and explain something that I just couldn't get my head around, I would find it very humbling. You can see just how complex a process it is, and I find it absolutely fascinating. I would love one day to try animation myself, but seeing this makes it all seem quite overwhelming. So that is the majority of the artwork done. However, one thing we like to do in these intros is add little details and little Easter eggs or things that change for each day of Vlogmas, and I suggested that maybe we could include the elf on the shelf. I'm sure you've heard of him, but he's this little red toy elf thing, and I said that perhaps we could hide him in a different location within the interior conservatory scene on each day of Vlogmas. Designing the elf was quite fun and really easy because essentially he just has very long stick legs and arms. I decided to give him dot eyes as opposed to the usual kind of big almond eyes I like to draw, because I didn't want him to look like another tiny human character. I wanted to differentiate him between the rest of the family, so we went with little dot eyes, and I think it makes him a bit more cute and less creepy as well. And then the last big job I had to do was the lettering, the hand lettering for the writing in the snow that would be left by the sled and Nala as they zoomed by. So it would be Vlogmas and then day 1, 2, 3 and so on and so forth. This actually took me ages because I was being so fussy. I was battling between creating like a realistic representation of words drawn in the snow, but it also looking clear and legible. I think we got there in the end though. Finally, it was a case of me essentially being on call for Rosie and Russ, and Russ, by the way, is another amazing animator that Rosie got on board to help with the animation because there was quite a lot to do this year. They would reach out to me with any little tweaks that needed to be made, because sometimes we just don't know until it gets to the animation stage whether my illustrations are going to work. As much as I enjoyed the whole process, for me, my favourite part is towards the end, as I start to see it all come together when Rosie sends me updates on the animation. As an illustrator and an artist, it is bizarre to see your work physically moving, and so cool. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I have the utmost respect for animators. It absolutely blows my mind the amount of work, skill and knowledge that goes into creating something so short. Is just astounding, but yeah, it makes what I do feel very, very basic, I will say. So, with all of that being said, I am very proud and excited to share with you Zoe Sugg's 2025 Vlogmas intro. That is a wrap, and I'm so happy, and I hope you like it as much as I do. You may have noticed that the light has changed and my outfit has changed, and that's because it is a couple of days later, because at the time of filming the majority of this video we still had a couple of little things left to do, and I wanted to wait until it was completely signed off so that I could officially say that we've done it. Vlogmas 2025, completed it. And I'm so happy. I would go as far to say that I think this year is my favourite to date. Every year they just get better and better, at least that's how I feel. Yeah, and I'm just so proud of what we have created. I do of course want to say a huge thank you to Zoe Sugg and Elfie Days for trusting me once again with this really fun project. And of course, another really big thank you to Rosie for her patience, her camaraderie. I don't often get to work collaboratively in my job, so working with Rosie is so refreshing and so fun, and I'm very grateful to her. And of course, another thank you to Russ for his excellent character animation, and to Helen for her highly amusing elf positions, Exhibit A. I will of course leave all of their details down below. And then finally, I'd also like to say thank you to you if you have made it this far through this video. Thank you so much, I really appreciate it. And if you're new here and you enjoyed it, I upload new videos every week, so I'd love it if you could subscribe. But otherwise, all that's left to say is I hope you all have a very merry December. Head on over to Zoe's channel if you haven't already, and get stuck into Vlogmas. I highly recommend it, and I will see you all very soon. Bye!